Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the California Consultation Series hosted by Circular Action Alliance, or CAA. My name is Frances Oni, and I will be moderating today's webinar. First, let's review today's agenda. We will introduce our panelists, then we'll give an overview of CAA and SB 54. Next, we'll have a presentation on community engagement in the collaboration process, followed by a Q&A period. We will finish off today's webinar by reviewing important next steps. Next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. With that, let's meet today's panelists. Emily Coven is CAA's California Executive Director. Lorene Urbina is Senior Vice President of Communications. From Changecraft, a firm specializing in audience research and behavior change social marketing, we have Brandon Tate, President, and Dr. Dana Wagner, Senior Director of Insights and Impact. I want to highlight a few important reminders. Today's presentation is intended for informational purposes only. CAA is not a law firm and does not provide legal advice. If you need legal guidance, please consult with your own counsel. Next slide, please. We want to underscore our commitment to compliance with federal and state antitrust laws. As participants, we need to avoid discussions around pricing, market allocation, or other topics that could create even the appearance of anti-competitive behavior. Next slide, please. A few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and both the recording and the slide deck will be available on CAA's California Consultation webpage. After today's webinar, you'll also receive a link to a questionnaire. We encourage you to complete it within 30 days as your input is essential in shaping a practical and effective program plan. Please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions, and we'll address as many questions as possible during the Q&A portion of this webinar. All participants will remain muted throughout this session. CAA provides updates on program plan development at the Producer Responsibility Advisory Board meetings, which anyone can attend by registering on CalRecycle's website. Next slide, please. We encourage you to register and attend the remainder of CAA's California Consultation Series webinars. And now I would like to hand it over to Emily Coven, CAA's California Executive Director.
Great. Thank you, Frances. So I'm going to do a couple things today. One is I'm going to provide a bit of information about CAA for those of you who are not familiar with us. And for those of you who have attended previous webinars, I apologize that you have to hear this again. And then I'll talk a bit about our sort of overview of our environmental justice efforts here. And then I'll hand it off to Changecraft to talk a little bit more specifically about the education and outreach component. So first and foremost, what is CAA? We are a nonprofit. We are led by producers, and you can see the members of our organization here that founded CAA. And we are a producer responsibility organization. Every state in the United States that has selected a pro for packaging, EPR, has selected CAA. So we are working in all of the possible states thus far. You can see on this map here where we are active. So there is a live EPR program up and running in Oregon right now that we are running. Colorado is on the brink of going live. California is the third state. And then we have Minnesota, Maryland, and some other states coming along soon as well. One of the things that's great about CAA is we do have a lot of expertise that we're able to apply here in California. So just the fact that we can talk to Oregon and Colorado and hear what's working there and what's not working there, as well as we have a lot of staff from Canada, because Canada is quite a bit farther ahead than the US in packaging EPR. And so a lot of our Canadian colleagues can tell us, have a lot of learning. So basically, we're not reinventing the wheel here. CAA is a remote organization, so we do have employees all over the country as well as in Canada, and the CAA California team is all here in California. So I want to spend a minute on this, looking at actually what a pro is, because this may be a new concept to some people. So it's a producer-led nonprofit, and it manages and improves the system for collecting and recovering materials after use. So the general concept of extended producer responsibility is shifting the burden, both financial and physical, for managing materials at the end of their life to the producers who put them into the system in the first place. And our job as the pro is to facilitate that entire system. So starting at the kind of the top of the clock here, we start out with doing a bunch of consultation. That's what we're doing today, engaging communities and interest holders and really understanding, and this is a big ecosystem here in California, all packaging in the entire state, what everybody's different needs are. What we do with all this information that we're gathering now is we put that into a program plan, which is a document that says, this is how we're actually going to do this. We are working on towards a June 15th, 2026 deadline. That's when we submit it to the plan to the SB 54 advisory board and by extension to Cal Recycle, who then review it for approval. Once the plan is approved, then we do everything else that you see on this here. So we work with producers to facilitate ensuring that they're compliant with the law. And we also set the fees that they will be paying into the big pot of money that then we use to do everything else. And we collect those fees from the producers. The way that we set the fees and other things we do with the producers are designed to incentivize them to make changes to their packaging, right? So with SB 54, there's a lot of incentives for producers to reduce their use of single-use plastic altogether, to convert over to reuse and refill, to convert to more recyclable materials, things like that. So that's a really big part of this law, especially here in California. And then, like I said, we collect these fees, and then the really big thing that we do with those is then use those fees to invest in the actual system. So we will be investing, and we have a series of webinars about this, how the whole reimbursement process works, but investing in collection programs, in processing, and then we really also have to work at developing the end markets for all these materials that we're trying to get into the system. And then finally, to support all of that effort, we'll have a statewide as well as local education and outreach efforts happening throughout the program. So, sorry, I have to look here. I lost my own slide. Okay, so one thing I want to clarify for everybody is CAA's role versus Cal Recycle's role, because this can be a little hard. I'm not going to go through all these bullet points. This is available to download on your time if you would like. But the high level is that our role is planning and implementation of the law. Cal Recycle's law is developing the regulations and then oversight of our plan and implementation. And so, if you come to us with questions or concerns about the regulations, we are most likely going to say, great, go talk to Cal Recycle. And if you go to Cal Recycle about something, your concerns about the implementation, they're going to say, great, go talk to CAA. So we're trying to get that clear as much as we can so that people aren't sort of kicked back and forth constantly and kind of know where to go. Broad strokes, SB 54 has very, very big, audacious goals on a scale not seen anywhere on the planet so far. We are looking to reduce single-use plastic in the state by 25%, and 10% of that to come from converting over to reuse and refill systems, to recycle 65% of single-use plastic, and to ensure that 100% of all packaging is recyclable or compostable. There are some stair-step targets in between now and 2032, but this is ultimately our end goal. Those first two, the obligation is on us as the pro to work with producers to make sure that happens. And then that third goal is actually each and every single producer has to do this. So, if you sell something in California in 2032, it has to be recyclable and compostable, whereas those first two are sort of across the whole spectrum of all producers. And so really what this consultation today about is getting ideas to put into our program plan, and ideas that work within the significant constraints that we are operating under. So we can't do anything in the whole wide world because we have to operate under statute and under regulations. So that's sort of one of our constraints. Another big constraint we have is time. There's a lot of great things that would take 20 years, but we have 5 years. So that's a big time constraint. And a lot of the changes we're looking to make will also take time. So we really have to be mindful of timelines. We do have financial constraints. Obviously, the producers are going to be paying significant fees, but they're not going to be paying infinite fees. So we have to figure out how to judiciously spend the money we have. And then we have to operate within within a great deal of uncertainty. There's a lot we don't know right now. First and foremost, we still don't have final regulations, but there's a lot of other unknowns out there as well. And we kind of have to build a plan that accommodates potential changes. And finally, sort of my big picture intro here, just want to make a quick comment about California and Californians' importance in this world. So California, when we actually implement SB 54 in its fullness, California will have the single largest packaging EPR program on the planet. We're really doing something on a scale and with goals that have never been done before. And so I keep hearing in my role here as California Executive Director, all eyes are on California. The world is watching California. It's a really amazing opportunity to have really substantial impact. And so when you participate in this process and when you send us your ideas and your questions and your thoughts and your concerns, they not only impact our state of 40 million people, but they could potentially have this ripple effect really quite far around the country and the planet. So first of many times you'll hear me say it, please, please, please send in your thoughts because we really need them to make this work well. So now I'm going to shift over to the content that we're going to share today on environmental justice and how that relates to SB 54. So the language here in the white, it comes directly from the statute that was passed by the legislature, which is disadvantaged and low-income communities are disproportionately impacted by the human health and environmental impacts of plastic pollution and fossil fuel extraction. So that's sort of the basis on which a lot of the language in the law and then where we're going comes from. And so CAA is very committed to ensuring that our actions respect this concept. The first thing I want to talk about is actually what CAA is not super involved in, but is probably the single biggest environmental justice component of SB 54. So in addition to the fees, the sort of normal fees that we will be collecting from producers, we will be collecting an additional $500 million per year surcharge to go into the California Plastic Pollution Mitigation Fund. And that is going to be divided up 40%, 60%. 40% goes towards monitoring and reducing environmental impacts, and 60% towards monitoring and reducing environmental justice and public health impacts. And then if you look at the sort of blue box below those, they both have an allocation, one at least 50, one at least 75% to benefit residents living in disadvantaged or low income communities or rural areas. And all of those funds may be used to support grants for tribes, non-governmental organizations, community-based organizations, land trusts, and local jurisdictions. That's a may, not a shall, so that could happen. That's up to the state how they administer it. So our role in this is literally to take the $500 million and hand it over to the state. We have no agency in what happens with these funds. You can see in this box expended by who actually will be administering those funds. And it's a bunch of different agencies within the California state government. It does include the Cal EPA, which includes Cal Recycle, but it's not at all just a Cal Recycle thing. It's very much a multi-agency effort. So that's a really, really big component. It's great. It's not our responsibility. So we sometimes get questions about this, and we want to be clear that like we hand the money over, and that's kind of us done on it. In terms of what our obligations we do have, so what's listed here on this slide is what we are actually required to do by statute And I put this here not to say, like, this is why we are looking at environmental justice, but instead just to be transparent about what we can and what we should be held accountable for as we go through this process. So it's really important that you're aware that this is what we need to be doing. And if you feel we're not doing this, please let us know. So what we are obligated to do is engagement with interest holders, making sure that all of our materials are accessible, coordinating among all the different points of contact that will be especially participating in education and outreach, fully funding all of our education and outreach, and measuring the impact of our efforts. So what I've kind of broken down what we are doing with environmental justice into 4 buckets here, and I'm going to go through each of them one by one. So the first one is research. Any good effort obviously needs to start with good research, and we are doing both qualitative and quantitative research. So on the qualitative side, it's a lot of, and you'll hear more about this from Changecraft, meetings, interviews, surveys, ongoing communications with communities and community leaders. Some of that, of course, rolls up into quantitative data, but that's a lot of conversation that's happening. And then on the quantitative side, we're looking at using the Cal EnviroScreen tool. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, but for those of you who are not, this was launched in 2013 by the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and it helps to identify California communities that are most affected by all sorts of different types of pollution. So ultimately, it's designed to help prioritize climate investments where they're needed most. Why this is super relevant for us is that we are going to be making substantial investments in the recycling system. And by using this tool, this will really help us to identify where our investments are going and how they are potentially impacting communities. I will tell you, for me, this is personally actually especially exciting. I have a very strong data and software background, and this is really an opportunity to measure and track the impact of recycling investments on a scale that's really never been done in California, or my guess is anywhere in the world. So this is really new, uncharted, and really exciting territory for us to have more visibility than anybody's ever had into these types of efforts. So to go a little bit more into the EnviroScreen, just so you all are clear on what we're going to be looking at, there are these 4 major indicators. I'm going to read a little bit here just because I don't have them all memorized. I want to make sure I get them right. So the exposure indicators assign a measurement to different types of pollution burden that people may already come into contact with, like air, water pollution, toxic spills, traffic density impacts, those kinds of things. The environmental effects indicator is the one that is where recycling and waste management falls under. So that's based on the locations of toxic chemicals in or near communities. So solid waste, landfills, recycling, composting facilities, those fall into this category. The sensitive population indicators measure people in a community who may be more severely affected by pollution because of their age or health, like asthma, cardiovascular disease, low infant birth weight. And finally, the socioeconomic factor indicators, those look at conditions that may increase people's stress or make healthy living difficult, causing them to be more sensitive to the effects of pollution. So housing burden in low-income households, linguistic isolation, high unemployment, education, and poverty, those can all be indicators. And I do want to say a little bit more about linguistic isolation. As I'm sure many of you know, close to half of Californians speak a language other than English at home, and 1 in 5 Californians do not speak English well or do not speak English at all. The Cal EnviroScreen has a separate map, like just for linguistic isolation, and that's something we will be using very much as we look at our education and outreach efforts and how we are targeting those in different areas to ensure that we are reaching people in the language that they speak. Okay, so that was our research component. On the engagement component, Brandon and Dana from Changecraft are going to dive into this more deeply, so I won't say too much here, but very broad strokes. Listening sessions, research with representative community leaders and communities. We'll be including multilingual opportunities for feedback. And the goal with this really is to incorporate lived experiences from a wide range of individuals. And ultimately, we're looking to develop a plan and in particular, education and outreach strategy, but our plan overall as well, that is not aimed at like a general public, but instead really meets everyone where they are. And in terms of planning, a lot of the planning, a lot of what we're going to be doing is dispersing capital to make these investments in the system. So this is really where we get into making sure that funding is dispersed equitably. A lot of the funding is going to be going to jurisdictions, and we are well aware that jurisdictions are not staffed equally. We have big cities that have a lot of staff and a lot of money, and we have some areas that have a 0.25 FTE who's in charge of everything. And so one thing we're going to be really certain to do at CAA with our California team is to make sure that everyone has the resources they need to submit their applications for reimbursements, to actually allocate those reimbursement dollars to making change in their community. And we'll be very supportive of that and make sure that then that money is dispersed equitably. We'll also be making investments in infrastructure that may lead to some job creation. We'll be looking at that very much with the lens of environmental justice. And of course, the education and outreach campaign overall will be able to track where those dollars are going to ensure that they are being dispersed equitably and reaching everyone as well. This is the area probably where we need your ideas the most and your thoughts and your input. So again, second plug, please fill out the questionnaire. Really let us know what your thoughts are on how we can plan in the best possible way. And then finally, we have to measure what we do. A lot of this, to be honest, is TBD because we don't have evaluation metrics yet, and we don't have success criteria because we first have to set exactly what our goals and objectives are. But once we do those, we are very committed to setting those success criteria, tracking them, and being transparent about how we're doing against those goals. So with that, I will hand it over to the Changecraft team. I believe Brandon's up first to tell us more about the community engagement piece.
Yep. Thanks, Emily. I am right here. Hi, I'm Brandon, founder and president of Changecraft. We're really excited to be here with you today to talk about how we're approaching environmental justice for California's EPR plan. Before just jumping into the approach and plan, I wanted to tell you a little bit about who we are, who I am, since hopefully we'll be able to have some dialogue with you as we're going through this process together over the coming weeks and months. So Changecraft, we are a California-based communications partner to CAA, leading all the education and outreach in terms of how we're implementing SB 54 here in California. We're a minority-owned small business in California, and we specifically work on topics that address past harms and improve human health. That's central to our mission. We specialize in behavior change marketing and community-based social marketing campaigns. All of our work is about achieving positive outcomes. Most of our work is in California. And across our team, we have creatives, strategists, PhD researchers, other specialists from media and PR and events and more. Personally, I wanted to say that this topic is really central to my experience and my passion. Over the past 20 years, I've worked exclusively for positive social causes in my work, ranging from things like LGBTQ efforts to working with Native youth outreach, to a range of public health topics from substance use to mental health. And in 2011, 2013, I'm now in Los Angeles and I'm often in Sacramento, back and forth, but at this time I was in San Diego. And I had the honor of working with environmental justice communities there in San Diego through my role at the time with Environmental Health Coalition, where I had the privilege of learning from community members and advocates. And a lot of those lessons are still with me today in my work in public health. So we as a team, we have team members across Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Diego, across the state. So we're really excited to be doing this effort. It's an opportunity for us together to reshape recycling and environmental health here in California in a way that builds trust, and we look forward to engaging with you. On the next slide, we wanted to talk a bit around our approach. As Emily mentioned, it's a critical aspect of the EPR plan for CAA. Engagement is a required element and something that we're taking seriously. So as part of that responsibility, Changecraft has been conducting outreach with environmental justice organizations and other types of interest holders throughout the state. To date, this has been really focused on the EPR plan. And we'll talk a little bit in a bit around the process and various things that are upcoming. That has been the focus to date. And we really just want to ensure that community voices and those of you that are in EJ organizations or working with environmental justice organizations, that those perspectives are being taken into account as we're developing the EPR plan, the Extended Producer Responsibility Plan. Given upcoming deadlines that we have around getting the EPR plan to CalRecycle, that has been the focus. There in the future, as that plan is approved by CalRecycle, the engagement will continue and will be ongoing, but we'll transition into focusing on how we're developing and how we're implementing an effective campaign together based on that plan. So now is the opportunity to really engage on what we want in that plan, and then we'll continue to engage in terms of how we implement and work on that together. So let's look at outreach to date on the next slide. We have, as I mentioned, been conducting outreach for the past few months. Changecraft and with our partners at CA, we've been reaching out to a wide range of community-based organizations, specifically some environmental justice organizations across California. If we've had the chance of communicating with you directly, thank you. Really appreciate your input. If we haven't, we welcome that and look forward to talking to you. The goal of this outreach to date has really been to establish some communication with interest holders, gather insights from communities, ensure that any concerns you have are being addressed, that your perspective is being taken into account. And so to achieve this, we've been engaging partners that are also helping us develop a list of organizations in terms of environmental justice organizations or organizations that have an environmental justice focus, so that we can make sure we're having the right conversations. We started conducting that initial outreach and then had many follow-up conversations with organizations as well, those that were interested in continuing the conversation. And along the way, we've been able to capture reflections and referrals and continue to build our list as we get referrals about who we should be connecting with. We really want to make sure that we're getting diverse perspectives from all the interested parties as possible. So while this is on the next slide, while this continues and will continue throughout this plan while we're developing the EPR plan, we just wanted to give you a brief summary of some of the things that we've heard to date. So you can let us know if this is resonating with you. I'm sure there are things missing, and we'd love to get that feedback from you in a survey or by reaching out to us directly. So some of the things we're hearing, we know our environmental justice groups, our EJ groups are stretched thin right now. Groups are engaging, even just within this EPR world, on multiple fronts. There are many of which are outside of the work that we're doing with CAA, whether that's the needs assessment or the rulemaking process, which is happening through CalRecycle. Many environmental justice organizations are being asked to give input on various aspects, in addition to us reaching out saying, hey, we want to talk to you about our education and outreach work, which is definitely future oriented, or input on our EPR plan. We know that all of that is happening at the same time. And it's also happening at the same time when EJ groups are being hit with a lot of other priorities and competing interests. We understand that the time can be challenging. There also was an opportunity in some of the conversations we had early on to clarify what was the role of the producer responsibility organization being CAA versus the role of CalRecycle. We hope that you're hearing some of that information today. You'll have a chance to review this deck further, and that hopefully that provides some illumination on exactly where our role is and where that stops in terms of engaging around developing the EPR plan and how we'll work together in the future. We also got some great input from some of our early EJ conversations with orgs that the focus should be an inclusive approach that extends beyond not just focusing organizations who specifically are EJ organizations, but also talking to community-based organizations across the state that may play an important role in local communities as it impacts recycling or other future implementation of the program. And that's great because that confirmed the really inclusive approach that Changecraft and CAA were already taking and had already intended on, as it relates to looking at historically underserved communities like low-income, rural, disadvantaged communities. And we've continued to expand our outreach to ensure that all those voices are being part of our engagement and the process that we're taking into account. We know that local voices are critical, so thank you for reinforcing that there will be opportunities, and some of our conversations reinforce that as we get to campaign implementation, many of the organizations, many of the EJ organizations or CBOs and communities may want to take an active role in grassroots outreach or direct partnerships. And so that feedback is an important element that we're taking into account as we design both the EPR plan and specifically as we design what our education and outreach campaign and elements are going to look like. And we also know that engagement really needs to be focused. And so as we're in conversations, we're trying to be very clear on what exactly it is that we're looking for feedback on. We hope today's webinar helps with that as well. We know that there are so many topics that many of you are working on. Environmental justice and environmental health topics span a wide range. We're specifically looking at packaging and the impact of plastics in communities. And so being able to focus on that and be clear around what aspects of the EPR plan we need your input on has been helpful, and we'll continue to do that as we engage further. Lastly, I just want to look at some of the core principles of how we're approaching environmental justice. And these principles are really serving as a guide for how we're engaging communities and how we're developing the plan in a thoughtful way. These are core principles that we're taking into account in the entire aspect of how we're engaging and working together. So the first of those is transparent decision making, ensuring that in any decisions that CAA is making as the pro, that there is transparency in terms of being communicated out to the public. And often there are opportunities for input on that before those decisions are final. And that is an important aspect of how we're ensuring you all are aware of the impact of the EPR plan and the decisions that are being made. Holistic systems thinking, we're ensuring that we know waste management is a multidimensional system, and it includes impacts on social, economic, environmental factors. And we're taking that into account in terms of the planning of all the various aspects of the system. There's a really great consultation series going on right now. This is just one of multiple webinars. So if you have a chance to attend some of the other webinars, looking at whether it's composting or how we're approaching in markets or how CAA is thinking about reimbursements and fee structures, all of that is looking at this holistic system. So I would encourage you to attend some other consultation series as well. We're also, Emily mentioned this is a really important aspect of where we do need your feedback is thinking about equitable resource allocation, because we do need to take into account the impact as we're considering where investments are going to be made. We're also ensuring that we're avoiding harmful impacts. That is an important aspect of SB 54 to prevent undoing the harms of the past where possible, and also mitigating any future harm. So that's all being taken into account in any recommendations that become part of the plan. And then ultimately also embedding accountability. It's a key component of the governance structures of CAA, and ensuring that any affected communities, that those impacts are being monitored and corrective actions are in place as part of the plan. So these are principles that we're taking a look at, that we're ensuring are how we're driving forward in our planning. I'll end it with, before I hand it over to Emily and to Dr. Dana Wagner to walk you through some of our research, on the next slide, just an invitation to reach out. This is our contact information here. On the next slide, please. Yes, if you are interested, please reach out. This is our inbox, caa@changecraft.com. Would love to hear from you if we haven't already. So thank you. With that, I'll hand it back to Emily to talk through our collaboration process and the EPR timeline.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. So yeah, I'm just going to walk through one slide here because this is a very CAA kind of situation we're looking at here, which is all the work that we are doing at CAA towards getting this program plan in place. So as many of you are probably aware, we just ended the 45-day public comment period for the draft regulations. And we are keeping our fingers crossed that on the third dot here, we will have final regulations in place in early 2026. We're also really looking forward to Cal Recycle's needs assessment, which we take into consideration in the program plan as well. So those are some big milestones for us. As you can see, we're also doing these program consultations. You're well aware of them because you are attending one. So we're doing this consultations now, starting to draft the program plan. We'll then, adapt the program plan based on the needs assessment and the final regulations. And we are really working towards this big June 15th deadline to submit the program plan to the advisory board. So that's everything we're doing right now is all sort of aimed at that date to get that into the advisory board. And then Cal Recycle, we'll look at that and decide whether to approve it. Presuming they do approve it, we are looking at actually going live with this program, hopefully in early 2027. As you know, there's a lot of unknowns on this timeline, but that's our sort of plan A in terms of the timeline. And then I will hand it over to Dana for where is it? Oh no, I went too far. The campaign development process.
Thanks so much, Emily. Yeah, as Brandon mentioned, the Changecraft team is excited to be here today, sharing some of the work that we've been doing and that we will be doing. Personally, I'm based in San Diego. I also travel up to Sacramento frequently to visit our team and clients that we have up there. My role at Changecraft is Senior Director of Insights and Impact. I'm a research psychologist. My work spans across social and behavioral research, health communications research, behavior change theory, and social justice and health equity research. So I've spent the last decade leading research to inform and evaluate federal, state, and local public education campaigns. I really feel passionately about including communities and community voices in the research process. And I'm excited for all the possibilities with this particular effort. So as the research lead for the SB 54 Education and Outreach Plan, I want to highlight some of the opportunities for collaboration, which will occur throughout the education outreach campaign planning process. So it's a multi-phase process. It includes primary and secondary research. So we have wrapped up our secondary research review, looking at past data, past EPR programs in California, experiences of Californians in previous data collections. And currently, we just wrapped up our statewide survey phase. So we just completed data collection about 2 weeks ago. This included residents and business owners, and findings from the survey will inform campaign strategy and early concepts for the campaign. So from there, we're going to conduct some interest holder feedback sessions. So we'll be taking the early strategies, early concepts, and we'd like to share them with communities, get the feedback, make sure that what we've gathered through our research and the insights are representing what Californians feel and what they need in terms of information. And then following this, we will develop creative concepts. So this gets a little bit closer to the point where we're actually going to have a campaign, and we want to test those concepts with the public. And finally, we're going to produce concepts, begin media planning, etc. So that's really the exciting part where we're actually going to see the materials come together. But the point here is there's multiple steps to get there, and we're still in those planning phases. And at the point where we're at right now with the statewide survey, we're just starting to look at the data and talking to folks, getting feedback and thoughts about real world experiences, not just the numbers, is really what we're hoping to do as we move this process forward. So on the next slide, I just want to give a little bit more information that I'm able to share about our statewide survey. So like I said, we're still working through data analysis. I just want to share a little bit more. We conducted the survey to inform the development of the education outreach campaign, like I said, and we also want to provide baseline data for any future reporting. So this is prior to unrolling SB 54 and the plan. Where are we at in terms of Californians' experiences, perceptions, the barriers, needs, support needs, etc. So the survey sampled 2010 California adults who own or rent a home. The survey was offered in English and Spanish, and we also conducted a business survey with 150 business owners and managers of businesses with 2 or more employees in the state. So respondents answered questions about their knowledge, perceptions, barriers, behaviors for recycling, reusing, and composting. Very long survey. So thank you to our participants for taking that time and really giving thoughtful feedback. And then from this pool, of participants, we are conducting follow-up interviews. So we're conducting those starting tomorrow and over the next few weeks, which is very exciting, to gather deeper insights from the experiences that people are reporting with the system, with their everyday experiences in their home, etc. So this information in the next 2 slides, very early preview. We're planning to share more at the consultation webinar session dedicated to education and outreach on October 23rd. So I hope to see you there as well. So as you can see on this slide, we're just showing you some of the sample characteristics of the resident population or the resident sample from our survey. So we had sampled Californians following census data. So we included quotas related to age, gender, race, ethnicity, and income. For both surveys, residents and business owners, we set sampling goals that also reflect the population density of 9 California regions as defined by CalRecycle. So we wanted to make sure the representation is what we would expect for the population of California across both surveys. On the slide, we provide just a quick snapshot of some of the characteristics. We're happy to say that our sample is reflective of the diversity of Californians across the board. This includes diversity of homes, so single family and multifamily residents are represented here, as well as urban, suburban, and rural. And about 35% of the sample identified as white, non-Hispanic, and a similar percentage identified as Hispanic or Latino. Of the 2010 homeowners, and that sounds like a year, so strange to say it out loud sometimes. Of the 2010 homeowners and renters surveyed, the most common language spoken was English, followed by Spanish. 20% of the sample reported speaking Spanish regularly at home, and 7% of the respondents opted to complete the survey in Spanish. All right, we'll go to the next slide, showing here that business owners and managers qualified for the survey based on quotas by industry and number of employees. So we reference Census Bureau statistics of US businesses and NAICS counts, as well as looking at the role that they play in waste management for the company. So we want to talk to folks who had some type of leadership or decision-making role in waste management. The majority of businesses in California are small or medium sized, so they were prioritized for sampling. And additionally, we reference data related to percent of businesses in each industry relative to their waste production for that industry to develop some industry quotas, just to make sure that we were getting proper representation across the board. And as expected, most common business types in our sample represented were food service, retail, and office-based. And most respondents reported their business had 2 to 10 employees, and then followed by 11 to 20 and 21 to 50. So really those small and medium businesses. On to the next slide, I just want to give a plug to our post-webinar questionnaire again. CAA is asking for your feedback on the content from today's webinar, our environmental justice engagement, and education and outreach is a piece of that. So as we wanted to make sure to cover all of those pieces. But within the questionnaire, we are asking for your thoughts and feedback on CAA's working objectives and goals related to our environmental justice approach and engagement. So in the survey, there's 5 draft objectives. They're also on this slide. We want your input on them. We want to know, is there anything missing? Are we on track? Are we off base? And I also want to acknowledge may seem like an odd ask for a questionnaire, but essentially we're hoping to open up dialogue here about what CAA and Changecraft should center our environmental justice approach on. Ideally, this would be a live conversation, and we would love to hear from you. So to start, we're just using this questionnaire as an opportunity to gather thoughts in writing, bring together some recommendations, and to give you a sense of what you'll see in the follow-up questionnaire, I'm just going to read the first part of each bullet here. So what we're proposing, the first objective of environmental justice approach and engagement for the EPR plan would be to first recognize and address the burden of waste, pollution, technology, and adequate services. Then provide channels for organizations and communities to help shape the EPR plan. Provide an opportunity for organization and communities to inform messaging and implementation strategies. Develop tailored solutions that support local efforts. And build long-term relationships that facilitate support and provide feedback for communities across California. We hope that you will help us continue to shape these objectives that will drive our environmental justice engagement approach in the EPR program plan. If it makes more sense for you to reach out, we are happy to schedule a meeting, and we have our contact information again on the next slide. So as I've mentioned, there are additional opportunities for input happening now in 2025. So one is the Pro Consultation webinar series, which is open to all. You're participating today, and we hope to see you on future webinars. Changecraft is also conducting outreach, as Brandon had talked to us about, to various groups across the state related to environmental justice topics and future education and outreach within communities. So we have a direct line to CAA. We're available to you. Please contact us, caa@changecraft.com, to schedule a meeting. It doesn't need to be formal or have a set agenda. If you have questions or just want to share your thoughts, let's meet. We just want to make sure that there's a way that you all can reach out and express concerns, even if we don't have all the answers. We want to make sure that we're available to you. There's also going to be the continued opportunities for engagement through 2026 and beyond. So interest holder feedback on early campaign strategy is 2026 is when we're thinking that phase will be. So we'll be putting together campaign strategy and then starting to talk to folks about that early strategy. Focus group testing of creative concepts also in 2026. And then implementation partnership after plan approval and program launch will be in 2027 and beyond. But we look forward to hearing from you now if this is something that you're interested in, you want to learn more about, or just want to be part of the early talks about what this could look like. We would really like input at this stage.
Thank you so much, Dana. And now we are going to hand it over to Lorene for the Q&A portion of the webinar.
Great. Thank you, Francis. And thank you, Dana, Brandon, and Emily, for a really great conversation. So we have some time for questions, which is fantastic. I'm really glad we have this time available. I will say we will do our best to answer all of the questions. I know there were a couple that were outside of the scope of environmental justice, so we may not be able to get to those, but we'll do our best. And maybe I'll start. There was one question regarding how CAA is going to be able to consistently and effectively engage with environmental justice communities and other groups while we're developing the program plan. So perhaps maybe the Changecraft team can start. And I don't know, Emily, if you want to supplement.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there, Reen. Yeah, great question. So what I described that we've done to date, we are reaching out to set up individual conversations. To date, it's been mostly individual with either with organizations specifically, or sometimes with coalitions that we're working with. And part of the engagement has to do with what the content of the engagement is. Right now, we're very focused on the plan. I noticed there's some questions around, well, in the future, we want to know, where things are going to be cited or where, this is going to happen. We may not be able to engage on those specific topics right now because we may not have that information. But what we're engaging on right now is the EPR plan because we're in the window of time where we're developing that. We're also engaging around what shape our education and outreach should look, because that is something where we really want community input on. If there are topics that we want to engage on that we're not ready yet, we can still talk about it. And part of our role is to help facilitate getting that information to CAA to ensure that we are coming up with a thoughtful plan to circle back on. So I would say that it's going to be ongoing. Those individual consultations will continue. We hope to establish some strong partnerships with groups that want to continue to engage. We also will have more formal sessions. So later this fall and early next year, we'll be doing some listening sessions once we have more detailed things to bring you around our communication strategy, for instance, and our education outreach plan. So we'll set up some specific interest holder groups around particular topics like Dana walked through when we have campaign materials ready to review.
Great. There's a question in here, and this is a little bit of environmental justice, and it goes a little bit beyond to one of our upcoming webinars, and that's around responsible end markets and how CAA will kind of work in an ongoing manner to ensure that we're really understanding the impacts of those facilities. So Emily, if you could speak to this.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a good question. It's an important question. So the statute, the actual law has pretty broad, general terms about responsible end markets, but the regulations say a lot more about what that means. One of our challenges, as you know, is the regulations are not final. So as we look at responsible end markets, really, first and foremost, we will be adhering to those regulations, whatever they may say at the, once they're finalized. But absolutely, as part of that process, we will be taking into account all of this research we're currently doing. And we will definitely, if we're looking at a specific project in a community, absolutely continue to engage with local communities on the impacts of any potential project or infrastructure. I think Loren mentioned, but we do have a webinar entirely all about responsible end markets. That is 1 week from today at this exact same time. So if Wednesdays at 10 a.m. are good for you, tune in next Wednesday and there'll be a lot more information in that webinar about responsible end markets.
Great. Thank you, Emily. There was one question regarding the research that's been done so far specific to how it relates to business. And the question was, were businesses with less than $1 million in annual sales excluded because they are eligible for small business exemptions under the law? So maybe Dana, if you could just explain a little bit about the business survey.
Yeah, sure. So just to clarify, the businesses that were included in the survey are not considered producers. So the exclusion that's referenced here, 1 million under $1 million excluded, those are referring to producers. What we're talking about are businesses in California that participate in offering waste services to employees or customers, that are part of those that are part of our achieving 65% recycling rate across the state. So to the extent we're trying to understand what the current experience is like for those who offer those waste management services and what supports are needed. I will say this was really just a quick snapshot of what's happening in the business level. We do plan on expanding business research in the future to better understand and capture what's happening for folks. But again, not at the producer level, but at those who are going to need support as SB 54 is implemented, and then ultimately are going to be part of our education and outreach process.
Great. Thank you, Dana. That's great. There was a question in here that relates a little bit to the education and outreach materials, and just acknowledging that the program will go live in 2027, at which point jurisdictions will need to accept a different list of items for recycling. Maybe Brandon, you could speak a little bit to kind of how we're developing the materials to support that work, and when municipalities, local governments, others who may be engaging in E&O activities may see some of that coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. We really look forward to working with you on those materials and hope to see you at some of the sessions we have coming up later this year and early next year around starting to get feedback on the strategy for that. So we know that the program overall will be live in 2027, which means prior to that, you will definitely have anything that's required to go live. We'll make sure that there's toolkits and resources available. In terms of the more detailed answer, I know you're looking for exactly when will that happen. We do have a webinar coming up on education and outreach, but we also may need a little bit more time to get back to you on specifically what that looks like. It's because some of that is going to be driven by the actual result of the EPR plan, which we're developing right now. So as that plan is finalized, as our plan for education and outreach is finalized, we will certainly be working with all of our interest holders, including jurisdictions, since we know you will be an incredibly important part in how we implement and how we educate the public.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you,
I'll just
Brandon.
add a little bit onto that, where like one of the things that's incredibly awkward about what we're doing at CAA right now is we're trying to build a program plan and prepare for implementation. Again, when we don't have final regulations and we don't know when the plan will be approved, so it just puts us in a bit of a awkward spot where yes, we absolutely want to. I would love to pull the trigger and do everything and give everybody everything they need tomorrow, but like we can't give you, like, if we haven't been approved by the state to say these are the right materials, this is what we want, this is the plan is approved, and we actually kind of can't do certain things. So that's why our timing can be a little awkward, right? If we have a plan we submit for approval in June and then we have a go live, I don't know, it could be January. They're sick, but we don't find out until November or December, that it's going live. That's a very short time window. And I know it's hard for jurisdictions. Everybody's supposed to be going live, immediately. So we will do our best, but I just wanted to sort of couch that answer with we have some, to a certain extent, our hands are tied until we have an approved plan. We are doing work in advance in anticipation of the plan being approved, but there's certain things until, like dispersing the reimbursements, we literally cannot do that until the plan is approved and it's official. And I think education and outreach will have to figure out what we can do before the plan's approved and what we have to wait for plan approval for. So just wanted to put a little finer point on that because it's awkward and it's not ideal, but we're doing what we can to make it work.
Great. Well said, Emily. And I think we have time for maybe one last question before we wrap up. And I'm going to kind of combine a couple things here together. So we've seen some questions around we've talked a lot about this input questionnaire, kind of how will that feedback be used? But then also, are there opportunities for environmental justice groups or others that are interested in these various topics like responsible end markets, perhaps education outreach and others to weigh in? I'll answer that second part myself, and then I'll turn it over maybe to Emily to speak to how the feedback will be used. But I think it's safe to say that we would welcome anyone on this call to also join any of the other calls. And if you can't join the calls, those recordings will be posted on the website, and you can still participate and provide input into those questionnaires. So even if you can't join live, anyone can still provide that input to the questionnaires that will help shape the program plan. And then Emily, maybe if you want to speak specifically to the input on this particular questionnaire.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't overstate how important and valuable it is to fill this out. What we're going to do is we're going to get all these responses back and we're going to look at them. We're going to look for overarching themes. We may follow up if people identify themselves on the surveys. You can do it anonymously, but if you do identify yourself, we may follow up with clarifying questions. And then we're writing this big program plan, and the environmental justice components are going to be throughout. And so we have the Changecraft team, and we have other writers working specifically with this lens on the program plan. So we have, teams working on the responsible end market part, teams working on the reimbursements part, and everybody, sort of writing up the program plan is going to then meet with the team that's working on this environmental justice input to make sure that that is fully and completely and accurately represented in the plan. So that's our general process, is take all this input, clarify, make sure we really understand the community's voices, and then work with all of our individual teams to make sure that it's fully and accurately represented in the final plan. I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Emily. So back over to you, Frances.
Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your time and participation. The next step is to provide your feedback. So if we can move to the next slide. Your feedback is very important in developing a robust and effective plan for achieving California's ambitious recycling and packaging waste reduction goals. Please complete the questionnaire using the link provided in the chat. You will also find a link to the questionnaire in an email following this webinar, or you can access the questionnaire by using the QR code on your screen. To do that, simply open the camera app on your smartphone or tablet, point your camera at the QR code on the screen, and then tap the link that pops up. That will take you directly to the questionnaire. Please submit your responses by 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on November 15th. We look forward to receiving your input. And then the next slide, please. You can stay up to date by following us on social media, visiting our website, or emailing us at info@circularaction.org. And thank you again for joining us today. Bye-bye.